The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds as I poured my second cup of coffee. At 62, I found myself savoring these quiet moments more than ever. My husband Richard had passed away 5 years ago, leaving me to navigate retirement, alone in our modest home in Maplewood. The house we'd bought together 35 years ago when we were young, hopeful, and completely terrified of the 30-year mortgage we'd just signed. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I'm Vanessa Mitchell, and for most of my life, I defined myself as a mother and a teacher. I taught second grade for nearly 4 decades at Lincoln Elementary, retiring just 2 years ago. Richard and I had raised 2 children in this 3-bedroom colonial, our daughter Emma, now living in Seattle with her wife and their twins, and our son Tyler, who lived just 20 minutes away in one of those luxury apartment complexes downtown. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Tyler. "Morning, Mom," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge that told me he was already stressed, despite it being barely 8 a.m. "Good morning, sweetheart. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just heading into a meeting. Listen, I need to cancel dinner tomorrow. Something came up with Gabriella's parents. They want us to come over to discuss wedding venues." I tried to hide my disappointment. Tyler and Gabriella had been engaged for almost a year, and somehow these urgent wedding discussions always seemed to coincide with our planned get-togethers. "No problem," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "We can reschedule. How's next week looking? I'll have to check. It's quarter end at work, so I'm swamped." Tyler worked as a financial analyst at Meridian Capital, a job that paid well but consumed nearly every waking hour. "Actually, Mom, there's something else we need to talk about." His tone shifted, and I instinctively sat down at the kitchen table, bracing myself. When your adult children use that particular tone, it's rarely good news. "What is it, honey?" "I've been looking at your finances, and I'm concerned." My back stiffened. "My finances? Tyler, we've talked about this. I'm doing just fine." "Are you, though? Your retirement fund isn't growing at the rate it should be. You're still in that big house with all those maintenance costs. Property taxes in Maplewood went up again this year." "I'm aware of the property taxes, Tyler. I pay them." "That's my point, Mom. You're spending money you don't need to spend. Have you considered what I suggested about the senior living community in Oak Ridge? They have those nice 1-bedroom units that would be perfect for you. No maintenance, no property taxes, and you'd have people your own age around." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. We'd had this conversation before, several times in fact. Tyler had a spreadsheet for everything, including apparently his mother's life. "I like my house, Tyler. It's my home. I have friends here, my garden, my memories with your father." "Memories don't pay bills, Mom," he cut in. "Look, I know. It's hard, but at some point you have to be practical. Emma and I have our own finances to worry about. We can't keep what?" I asked, my voice suddenly sharp. "When have I ever asked either of you for money?" Silence stretched over the line. Then Tyler sighed. That condescending sigh that made me feel like I was the child and he the parent. "I'm just trying to help you plan for the future, Mom. You're becoming, well, potentially a financial burden. Not now, but if something happened, a major house repair, medical bills, Emma and I would have to step in." The words financial burden echoed in my head. After decades of scrimping and saving to put 2 children through college without a penny of debt, after working summer school every year so they could have braces and soccer camps and prom outfits, after delaying my own retirement by 5 years to ensure my financial independence, I was now being labeled a potential burden. "I need to go, Tyler. Your meeting is waiting." "Mom, don't be upset. I'm just looking out for me." "Yes, I know. Goodbye, Tyler." I hung up before he could respond, setting the phone down with trembling hands. Outside, Mrs. Patterson walked by with her terrier, waving cheerfully as she passed. I waved back automatically, grateful she couldn't see the tears welling in my eyes. Financial burden. The audacity of it stung worse than the fear that he might be right. No. I shook my head firmly. Tyler wasn't right. I had always been careful with money, a habit ingrained from childhood when my own parents struggled to make ends meet. Richard and I had lived modestly, prioritizing savings and education funds over luxury vacations or status symbols. Our house was paid off. I had my pension, Social Security, and our investment account that Richard had managed so diligently. Still, doubt crept in. Was I being stubborn? Was I clinging to a house that was too big for one person? The property taxes were indeed substantial, and last winter's heating bills had been higher than expected. I pulled out the file folder where I kept my financial documents. Old-fashioned, I know, but I preferred paper to digital statements. As I reviewed the numbers, a slow realization dawned. Tyler didn't actually know my full financial picture. He'd seen some of my retirement accounts, yes, but not everything. Not the life insurance policy Richard had left that I'd invested rather than spent. Not the treasury bonds that had matured last year. More importantly, Tyler had no idea what his father and I had arranged years ago, well before Richard's unexpected heart attack. We'd set up trusts for both children to be accessed when they reached certain milestones in life. Emma had received hers when she and Diane adopted the twins. Tyler's was earmarked for when he purchased his first home. Tyler and Gabriella had been renting that luxury apartment for 3 years now. Every time the subject of buying a house came up, Tyler would list all the reasons it wasn't the right time. The market was too high. Interest rates weren't favorable. They hadn't found the perfect location. What he really meant was that he didn't want to give up the amenities of that downtown lifestyle. The rooftop pool, the concierge service, the prestigious address. I closed the folder and reached for my phone, scrolling to a contact I hadn't called in some time. After 3 rings, he picked up. Stanley Mitchell, how the hell are you? The booming voice of Richard's older brother brought an immediate smile to my face. It's Vanessa, Stan. Well, I'll be. Vanessa, how's my favorite sister-in-law? I'm your only sister-in-law, Stan. His laughter rumbled through the phone. Doesn't make it any less true. What can I do for you? Stanley had retired from real estate 5 years ago, but he still kept his license active and his finger on the pulse of the local market. More importantly, he was one of the few people who could handle Tyler's strong personality without creating family drama. I need some information on a property. Actually, on several properties. By the time we finished our conversation 30 minutes later, a plan was forming in my mind. It wasn't revenge exactly. I wasn't that petty. It was more of a life lesson, one that Tyler apparently needed. 3 days later, I sat across from Tyler and Gabriella at Rossini's, the Italian restaurant downtown that was fancy enough for Tyler's tastes but not so expensive that I felt guilty ordering more than just salad. Gabriella looked radiant as always, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo, her engagement ring catching the light. Tyler was in his work clothes, his tie loosened just slightly, checking his phone every few minutes despite Gabriella's pointed looks. So, I said, after we'd ordered, I've been thinking about what you said the other day, Tyler. He looked up, from his phone. About your finances? Yes. You're right that I need to plan more carefully for the future. His expression shifted to surprise, then satisfaction. That's great, Mom. I've actually been researching some financial advisors who specialize in retirement planning for... I've already taken care of it, I interrupted gently. What do you mean? I've made some investment decisions. Actually, that's why I wanted to meet with both of you tonight. Gabriella leaned forward, her interest piqued. She worked in marketing, but she had a degree in economics and often understood financial matters better than Tyler, though he'd never admit it. What kind of investments, Vanessa? She asked. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick envelope, sliding it across the table. See for yourself. Tyler opened the envelope and pulled out the documents inside, his brow furrowing as he read. Gabriella peered over his shoulder, her eyes widening. "Mom?" Tyler said slowly. These are property listings." "Yes." "3 of them, to be exact." "In Lakeview Heights?" Gabriella asked, naming one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the area. "These are gorgeous homes." "Thank you. I thought so too. Your Uncle Stanley helped me find them. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off." Tyler was still staring at the papers, flipping through them with increasing agitation. "Mom, what is this? Why are you looking at million-dollar properties?" "This is exactly what I was worried about. Impulsive financial decisions that could—" "I'm not looking at them, Tyler. I've already purchased one." The silence that fell over our table was so complete that I could hear the conversations from 3 tables away. Tyler's face had gone pale, while Gabriella looked from him to me with an expression caught between shock and— was that admiration? "You— what?" Tyler finally managed. "I closed on the Colonial on Sycamore Street yesterday. The one with the blue shutters and the wraparound porch. It needs some updating, but the structure is sound and the location is excellent. Your Uncle Stanley says it will appreciate significantly over the next 5 years." "Mom, that's insane. Where did you even get the money for something like that?" I took a sip of my water, letting the moment stretch. "Your father and I were always careful with our money, Tyler. More careful than you knew. But you can't just—" He was sputtering now, his financial analyst brain clearly short-circuiting. At the thought of his supposedly financially precarious mother purchasing $1 million home. "I actually bought it as an investment property," I continued calmly. "I'll be renting it out." "To who?" The question burst from him like an accusation. I smiled and reached across the table to take Gabriella's hand. "To you two, if you're interested." Gabriella gasped softly. "Vanessa." Tyler was shaking his head. "Mom, we can't afford the rent on a place like that. Even with my salary and Gabriella's, I'm offering you a rent-to-own arrangement," I explained. "The monthly payment would be roughly what you're paying for your apartment now, maybe slightly more. But instead of throwing that money away on rent, you'd be building equity. After 2 years, if you decide you want to stay, we can transfer the property into your name, and the payments you've made will count toward the down payment." "This doesn't make any sense," Tyler insisted. "Why would you do this?" "Because I'm your mother, and contrary to recent opinions, I'm not a financial burden. I'm a financial resource." Gabriella suddenly let out a small laugh, quickly covering her mouth. "I'm sorry, but Tyler, didn't you just say last week that we should start looking at houses before the wedding? Something about building equity instead of paying ridiculous rent?" Tyler's face flushed. "That's not the point, Gabby." "What is the point then?" I asked gently. He looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years seeing not just his mother, but Vanessa Mitchell, a woman who had managed a classroom of 32nd graders for decades, who had navigated widowhood with grace, who had raised 2 children while never missing a mortgage payment. "I don't understand," he finally said, his voice quieter now. "Why didn't you tell me about all this? Your finances? These investments?" "Because you didn't ask, Tyler. You assumed. You looked at my age and my circumstances and decided I needed to be managed rather than consulted." The waiter arrived with our food, momentarily pausing the conversation. When he left, Gabriella was the first to speak. "Vanessa, this is incredibly generous, but are you sure? This is a major investment." "I'm sure. And there are conditions." I turned to Tyler. "The first month's mortgage payment is due next week. The full amount, no discounts, no mother's special. I want you to know exactly what home ownership feels like." Tyler stared at me, realization dawning on his face. This is about what I said, isn't it? About you being a financial burden. Partly, I admitted, but it's also about family and what that really means. It's not just spreadsheets and risk assessments, Tyler. It's trust and respect. It's believing that I can make my own decisions. And it's knowing that I would never, ever leave either of my children truly burdened, financially or otherwise. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable like before. It was thoughtful, perhaps even a little reverent. Tyler set down the property documents and picked up his fork, but didn't start eating. The house really does have a beautiful porch, Gabriella said softly. I noticed it when we drove past it last month. I mentioned how perfect it would be for morning coffee. Tyler glanced at her, then back at me. You remembered that? Of course I did. I'm your mother. I listen. He looked down at his plate, then backed up. There was something different in his eyes now. Something that looked almost like the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and treasured findings. I'm sorry, Mom. I was way out of line. Yes, you were, I agreed, taking a bite of my pasta. But you're still learning, and now you get to learn about property taxes firsthand. Gabriella burst out laughing, and after a moment, Tyler reluctantly joined in. As we ate, the conversation turned to the house, to moving plans, to wedding details now that they'd have a proper place to host family gatherings. Later that night, as I drove home to my beloved old house in Maplewood, I thought about Tyler's face when he realized what I'd done. It wasn't just shock or embarrassment I'd seen there. It was something else. Something like respect. And maybe, just maybe, a newfound understanding that his mother wasn't a burden to be managed, but a foundation upon which he could still rely. The first mortgage payment would hit him hard. I knew that. But some lessons are worth their weight, in gold. Or in this case, in real estate. The week after our dinner at Rossini's passed quickly. I threw myself into gardening, determined to transplant my prized hydrangeas before the summer heat made it impossible. My neighbor Frank Henderson stopped by with fresh tomatoes from his greenhouse, lingering a bit longer than necessary to chat about the neighborhood association's latest drama. At 70, Frank had been widowed even longer than I had, and our friendship had grown comfortable over shared fence lines and occasional potluck dinners. Heard your son might be moving to Sycamore Street, he said, leaning against my porch railing. News travels fast when Stanley Mitchell's involved, I smiled, pinching off a dead bloom from my porch planters. Stanley needs to learn the meaning of confidentiality. That man couldn't keep a secret if his life depended on it. Frank chuckled. So it's true then? You bought the old Harrison place? I did. Frank whistled low. Bold move, Vanessa. That's quite the investment. It's not just about the money, I said, offering him a glass of iced tea. It's about teaching Tyler a lesson about respect. Frank accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. The financial burden comment? Stanley mentioned that too. I sighed. Is nothing sacred anymore? Not in Maplewood. Frank's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. For what it's worth, I think it's brilliant. Tyler's always been, let's say, confident in his opinions. That's putting it kindly. Richard always said Tyler got his stubbornness from me, but I think we both know where that particular trait came from. We shared a knowing look. Richard had been the most wonderfully stubborn man I'd ever known, a quality that had served him well in his career as an engineer, but had made for some memorable family disagreements over the years. Have you heard from him? Since the dinner? Frank asked. 2 text messages, the first asking for the mortgage details, the second confirming he'd made the payment. I set my tea down, but the radio silence otherwise. He's processing. That's good. Means he's taking it seriously. I hope so. I gazed out at the street, watching Mrs. Patterson's grandchildren ride their bikes in wobbly circles. I didn't do this to hurt him, Frank. I just couldn't bear the thought of my son seeing me as diminished, as a problem to be solved. Frank's weathered hand covered mine briefly. If anyone has diminished capacity around here, it's Tyler for not recognizing his mother's strength. Richard would be proud of you, Vanessa. After Frank left, I found myself drawn to the small home office where Richard and I used to pay bills and file taxes. The computer was newer. Emma had insisted I upgrade last Christmas, but Richard's old leather desk chair remained, still molded to the shape of his body after all these years. I pulled up my email, finding the notification from the bank confirming Tyler's mortgage payment, $4,253.67. I winced slightly, imagining Tyler's face when he authorized that transfer. It was a hefty sum, especially with wedding expenses looming. But it was also less than what Richard and I had paid for our first mortgage, adjusting for inflation. We'd made it work with 2 teachers' salaries and diapers to buy. Tyler made triple what I had at the height of my career, and Gabriella wasn't exactly underpaid in her marketing director position. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Emma. "Mom, what did you do?" Her voice held a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "Tyler just called me ranting about a house and a mortgage and you going financially rogue." His words, not mine. I laughed despite myself. I see news travels fast. In the Mitchell family. Are you kidding? This is the most exciting thing to happen since Dad tried to build that treehouse and fell through the roof of the garage. That was not exciting, Emma. Your father could have been seriously hurt. Yet somehow he managed to hold on to his beer the whole way down. Pure talent. The memory made me smile. Richard had indeed kept his grip on that can of Budweiser, emerging from the splintered plywood with a minor scrape and wounded pride. "So," Emma continued, "you really bought $1 million house just to prove a point to Tyler?" "It wasn't just to prove a point. It's a sound investment in a growing area. The property values in Lakeview Heights have increased by 30% in the last 3 years alone." "Mom, you sound like a real estate brochure." "Your Uncle Stanley might have coached me on that part." Emma's laughter echoed through the phone. "Well, however you justify it, I'm impressed. And a little shocked. But mostly, I was impressed. Tyler has needed someone to take him down a peg since, well, forever." "I didn't do it to take him down, sweetie." "No, but that's a lovely bonus, isn't it?" I could practically hear her smirk. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Tyler and Gabriella decide if they want the house. If they do, they'll start making payments. If not, I'll find another tenant. Either way, I've made a solid investment. And if they take it? "You'll really transfer it to them after 2 years?" I hesitated. "That's the plan. Though I might require Tyler to attend a few financial literacy workshops first." Emma snorted. The great financial analyst getting schooled by his second grade teacher mother. This is pure poetry. After catching up on Emma's children and work, we ended the call with promises to video chat over the weekend. I sat in Richard's chair a while longer, wondering what he would think of all this. I could almost hear his deep chuckle, see the pride in his eyes. "That's my Vanessa," he would have said. Never underestimate her. 3 days later, my doorbell rang shortly after 7 p.m. I opened it to find Tyler standing on my porch, a bottle of wine in one hand and a folder of papers in the other. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from more than just physical fatigue. "Can we talk?" he asked simply. I stepped aside to let him in, leading him to the kitchen where we'd had so many family conversations over the years. I poured us each a glass of the wine, a nice Cabernet that Tyler preferred, and waited. "I paid the mortgage," he said finally. "I know. I got the confirmation." He nodded, taking a long sip from his glass. It was illuminating. "How so?" "It's a lot of money, Mom." "Yes, it is. And that's just the beginning, isn't it? There's property insurance, utilities, maintenance, unexpected repairs." I nodded. "Welcome to homeownership. Your father and I learned those lessons the hard way when the basement flooded 3 months after we moved in." Tyler winced. I remember you telling me about that. You had to replace the water heater too, right? And the washer and dryer. All in the same month that you needed braces. He was quiet for a moment, tracing his finger around the rim of his wine glass. How did you do it? All those years, raising 2 kids, managing this house, working full-time, and still saving enough to do what you just did? The vulnerability in his question caught me off guard. Tyler had always projected such confidence, such certainty, about how life should be lived. Seeing him genuinely puzzled by his mother's financial acumen was a startling reversal. We lived within our means, I said simply. We prioritized needs over wants. We saved consistently, even when it was just a tiny amount. And your father was brilliant with investments. He taught me everything I know. Dad never talked to me about any of this. He tried, Tyler. Do you remember when you got your first job at that tech startup after college? Dad offered to help. You set up a retirement account? Walk you through investment strategies? Tyler flushed slightly. I told him I had it covered, that my company had financial advisors for employees. Yes, and he respected that. But he was disappointed. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know, sweetheart. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his. Not because you're not smart or capable, but because you sometimes decide you already have all the answers. He didn't pull away, which I took as progress. Gabriella loves the house, he said after a while. She's already planning where everything will go, talking about paint colors and curtains. She has excellent taste, and that wraparound porch is perfect for morning coffee, just like she said. Tyler looked up sharply. You really did buy it because of that comment, didn't you? Partly. The investment potential is real, but yes, when Gabriella mentioned loving that porch, it stuck with me. He shook his head slowly. I still can't believe you did this. It's so dramatic. I prefer impactful, I said with a small smile. Some lessons need to make an impression. Message. Received, loud and clear. He pulled out the folder he'd brought and placed it on the table. I spent the weekend going over my finances, our finances, mine and Gabriella's. I created a detailed budget for the next 5 years, accounting for the mortgage payments, estimated property taxes, maintenance costs, and inflation. I opened the folder to find meticulously organized spreadsheets, color-coded projections, and detailed notes. Pure Tyler. This is impressive, I said genuinely. It's what I do. He shrugged. The bottom line is, we can afford it. It'll be tight. For the first year, especially with the wedding, but doable. More than doable, actually. It makes financial sense in the long run. And you're comfortable with the arrangement? The rent-to-own terms? Tyler met my eyes directly. I'd like to propose a modification. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. Instead of rent-to-own, I'd like to buy the house from you outright. Gabriella and I have the savings for a 20% down payment if we combine our accounts. We'd need to secure a mortgage for the rest, but with our credit scores and income, that shouldn't be a problem. This was unexpected. You'd forfeit the 2 years of payments counting toward your down payment? That's a significant amount of money, Tyler. I know, but this way is cleaner, and... He hesitated. I need to do this myself. Not as a handout, or a lesson from my mother, but as a man starting a family, buying a home on his own terms. I felt a swell of emotion that was part pride, part nostalgia. Was this what Richard had felt when Tyler took his first steps? That bittersweet recognition that independence once granted rarely reverses course? Your terms are acceptable, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'll have Stanley draw up the paperwork. Tyler nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. There's one more thing. Oh? I need to apologize. Properly. He set down his wine and straightened in his chair. What I said about you being a financial burden was completely out of line. It was presumptuous, disrespectful, and frankly, dead. Wrong. I made assumptions based on incomplete information, and I treated you like you were somehow less capable because of your age or profession. That was unforgivable. Not unforgivable, I corrected gently. Misguided, perhaps. More than misguided. It was arrogant. Dad would have been furious with me. Your father would have understood. He wasn't perfect either, Tyler. He made his share of mistakes, especially when he was your age. Tyler looked surprised. Dad? Making mistakes? I find that hard to believe. I laughed softly. Oh, the stories I could tell you, like the time he decided to invest in your uncle's hair salon franchise, without consulting me first. Wait, what? Uncle Stanley owned a hair salon? 3 of them, briefly. Let's just say the Mitchell brothers weren't cut out for the beauty industry. For the first time that evening, Tyler smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I wish I'd known that side of Dad. You were too busy, trying to impress him to notice his flaws, and he was too proud of you to point them out. We talked for hours that night, covering ground we hadn't explored in years. I told Tyler stories about his father that he'd never heard. The financial missteps, the arguments about money, the way we'd finally learned to compromise. In turn, Tyler shared his anxieties about the wedding, about starting a family someday, about the crushing expectations he placed on himself at work. As the evening wound down, Tyler gathered his papers and stood to leave. So we have a deal? On. The house? He asked. We do. Though I have one non-negotiable condition. He looked wary. What's that? Sunday dinners. Once a month minimum. Here or at your new place, I don't care which. But I want time with you and Gabriella that isn't rushed or rescheduled. Tyler's expression softened. We can do better than once a month, Mom. Let's start there and see how it goes. I know how busy you both are. At the door, Tyler hesitated, then pulled me into a hug tighter than any he'd given me in years. Thank you, he whispered. Not just for the house, but for not giving up on me. I'm your mother, Tyler. That's not how it works. After he left, I sat on the porch swing Richard had installed the summer before he died. The night air was sweet with the scent of early summer blossoms, and somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called out to the darkening sky. My phone buzzed with a text message from Gabriella. Tyler just got home. Whatever you said changed. Something in him. Thank you. Also, can we do a housewarming BBQ next month? Planning to invite both families. I smiled, typing back. BBQ sounds perfect. I'll bring my potato salad. Another message arrived almost immediately. And would you consider helping with the kitchen colors? I know you have an eye for design. This time my reply came with misty eyes. I'd be honored. Just name the day. As I headed back inside, closing the door on the peaceful night, I couldn't help but feel that Richard was somewhere, watching all of this unfold with that knowing smile of his. Our son was growing up, perhaps a bit later than expected, but growing nonetheless. The house in Lakeview Heights would be Tyler and Gabriella's first home together. They would argue within its walls, celebrate milestones, perhaps raise children there someday. And every month, when they made that mortgage payment, they would understand a little better what it means to build something lasting. Not just a home, but a life. As for me, I had no intention of moving to that senior living community in Oak Ridge or anywhere else. This house, with its creaky third stair and the mark on the kitchen doorframe tracking Tyler and Emma's heights, was where I belonged. I was neither a burden nor a resource to be managed. I was simply Vanessa Mitchell, mother, widow, retired, teacher, and apparently accidental real estate investor. The financial burden comment had stung, yes, but in the end, it had opened a door between Tyler and me that had been closed for too long. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most uncomfortable packages. And sometimes, A mother's best teaching happens long after her children have left the classroom. 6 weeks after Tyler's nighttime visit, I found myself standing in the spacious kitchen of the Sycamore Street house, surveying paint swatches with Gabriella. The closing had happened with remarkable speed, Tyler's financial connections proving useful for once, and now the young couple was knee-deep in renovation plans before their official move-in. "What do you think about this sage green for the D?" "Cabinets?" Gabriella held up a paint chip against the white cabinet doors. "Too trendy?" I tilted my head, considering. "It's beautiful, but remember, trends fade. Classic colors endure." "That sounds like something my grandmother would say," Gabriella laughed, but there was warmth in her voice. She was an interior designer in Chicago, always telling me, "Gabriella Marie, don't chase fashion in your home. You'll be repainting every 3 years." "Smart woman, your grandmother. She would have liked you." Gabriella set down the sage green and picked up a soft cream color instead. "What about this, with navy blue for the island?" "Now you're speaking." My language. Timeless but not boring. We continued through the house, discussing paint colors, window treatments, and furniture placement. I was careful not to overstep, offering opinions only when asked, respecting that this was their home to shape. Still, I couldn't help but feel a quiet joy each time Gabriella sought my advice or shared her vision for a space. "Tyler wants to turn the smallest bedroom into a home office," she explained as we reached the second floor. "But I'm thinking, well, maybe we should keep our options open. For the future." The implication hung in the air between us. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart quickened at the thought. "Flexibility is always wise in home design," I said carefully. "Rooms can evolve as needs change." Gabriella smiled, a private sort of smile that told me she appreciated my restraint. "Exactly." We broke for lunch on the wraparound porch, enjoying sandwiches from the deli down the street. The August heat shimmered above the freshly cut lawn. Tyler had insisted on mowing it himself last weekend, despite having hired a landscaping service for regular maintenance. "How's he really doing with all this?" I asked, gesturing to the house around us. "The mortgage, the responsibility, the commitment." Gabriella considered the question before answering. "It was rough that first week. I've never seen him so stressed. Checking accounts daily, recalculating budgets, questioning every purchase. He actually returned a tie he'd bought because it was fiscally irresponsible." I winced. That sounds extreme, even for Tyler. It was. But then something shifted. She set down her sandwich. He got a call from a client, older gentleman, retiring after building his company from nothing. Tyler was handling his portfolio transition. The man told Tyler about buying his first house in the 70s, how terrified he'd been of the commitment, how his father had to co-sign because no bank would take a chance on him. And that resonated with Tyler? It did. He came home that night and said, "My mother believes in me enough to sell me $1 million house. Why am I doubting myself?" The simple statement caught me off guard, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. I looked away, pretending to watch a cardinal that had landed on the porch railing. "That's not why I did it," I said quietly. "It wasn't about believing or not believing in him." Gabriella reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Wasn't it, though? At least partly. You trusted him to rise to the occasion, to learn from the experience. That's a form of belief." Perhaps she was right. For all my indignation at being labeled a financial burden, for all my determination to teach, Tyler a lesson in respect, underneath it all had been a bedrock certainty that he would ultimately handle the responsibility well. I had never doubted his capabilities, only his perspective. "Your wedding is in 3 months," I said, changing the subject. "Are you still planning to move in before then?" "Next weekend, actually. Most of the cosmetic work can happen around us." Tyler's lease ends September 1st, and he's determined not to throw away another month's rent. I laughed. That sounds like him. Once he commits to a financial principle, he's all in. Tell me about it. He's created a household budget spreadsheet with 17 categories and color-coded alerts for when we exceed our allocations. It would be annoying if it weren't so endearing. Richard was the same way, I said, memories washing over me. He tracked every penny when we were first married, kept receipts in little envelopes organized by category. This was before apps and digital banking, of course. Each month we'd sit at the kitchen table and go through it all together. Did you mind? The detailed tracking? I shook my head. Not at all. It gave us both security, knowing exactly where we stood. And it meant we could celebrate the victories too, paying off a credit card, reaching a savings goal. Those moments meant something because we'd tracked the journey. Gabriella nodded thoughtfully. I never thought about it that way. The tracking? As a path to celebration, not just restriction. That's the secret no one tells you about financial discipline. It's not about depriving yourself. It's about creating space for what truly matters. We spent the afternoon measuring windows for curtains and finalizing the paint selections. As I prepared to leave, Gabriella walked me to my car, hesitating before closing the passenger door where I'd placed my purse. There's something I wanted to ask you, she said, her usually confident demeanor suddenly uncertain. It might seem odd considering everything that's happened. Go ahead, I encouraged. Would you help me with my dress? For the wedding? My mother's in Arizona dealing with my grandmother's health issues, and she might not make it back until just before the ceremony. I could use a second opinion, someone with good taste and, well, someone who cares. The request touched me deeply. I'd be honored, Gabriella. Truly. Her relief was palpable. Thank you. The first fitting is next Thursday. At 3, I'll text you the address of the boutique. As I drove home, I reflected on how differently things had unfolded than I'd anticipated. When I'd purchased the Sycamore Street house, I'd expected resistance, resentment, perhaps even rejection of my offer. Instead, it had become a bridge between my son and me, and unexpectedly, between Gabriella and me as well. The following weekend, I joined Emma on a video call to catch her up on recent developments. Her twins tumbled in and out of the frame, 7-year-old bundles of energy who had Richard's eyes and Emma's unstoppable curiosity. So, you're telling me, Emma said, corralling Zach back into view momentarily, that not only did Tyler accept the house, he's actually buying it outright, and he's turned into a budgeting zealot? Who are you, and what have you done with my brother? People can surprise you when given the chance, I replied. Your brother included. And now you're helping Gabriella with wedding stuff? Mom, this is not how I expected your revenge plot to play out. I frowned. It was never about revenge, Emma. I know. But admit it. There was a small part of you that enjoyed watching Tyler eat humble pie. Perhaps a very small part, I conceded. But that's not what matters now. What matters is that we've found a new footing, more honest, more respectful. Emma's expression softened. I'm happy for you, Mom, really, and maybe a little jealous that you get to be involved in the wedding planning while I'm stuck in Seattle. You'll be here for the ceremony, and you're the maid of honor. That counts for a lot. True. And Tyler did ask Diane to handle the photography, which was a nice gesture. See? Growth. Emma laughed. All right, I'll reserve judgment until I see this new enlightened Tyler for myself. Speaking of which, have you talked to him about Thanksgiving? We were thinking of flying in for the whole week, if that works for everyone. We haven't discussed it yet, but I'm sure it would be fine. Maybe we could even host it at the new house. Give them a chance to show it off. Ooh, good idea. Their first major hosting gig is almost marrieds. The pressure might make Tyler's head explode. Emma, I chided, though I couldn't help smiling. My children's relationship had always been characterized by a mixture of fierce loyalty and merciless teasing. Some things never changed, regardless of mortgage payments and wedding plans. After saying goodbye to Emma and the twins, I decided to tackle the storage boxes in my attic, a project I'd been avoiding for months. Among the holiday decorations and outgrown clothes was a smaller box labeled simply Richard Financial. Inside were the leather-bound ledgers my husband had kept during our early years together, tracking our slow but steady journey toward financial stability. I opened one from 1987, the year Tyler was born. Richard's precise handwriting detailed the hospital bills, the new expenses for baby supplies, the adjustments to our budget to accommodate my reduced teaching schedule. In the margins were small notes that had nothing to do with money. Tyler smiled today, a real smile, not gas. And Vanessa amazing with no sleep. How does she do it? These small observations made my throat tighten with emotion. Richard had seen me, truly seen me, even in the midst of spreadsheets and calculations. He had never reduced me to a line item or a potential liability. I had always been his partner, his equal in our shared financial journey. I brought the ledger downstairs and set it on my kitchen table, next to the property transfer documents for the Sycamore Street house that had arrived earlier that day. The contrast between the handwritten pages and the digital printouts was striking, a visible representation of how far we'd all come. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Mom, we need advice on homeowners insurance. Got time for a call tomorrow?" I smiled as I typed back, "Always have time for you. Call whenever works best." 3 days later, I received an unexpected delivery, a large package wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a beautiful wooden sign, hand-painted with the words, "The Mitchell Family Est, 2025," in elegant script. A note from Tyler read simply, "For the front porch. New traditions start now." The months leading up to Tyler and Gabriella's November wedding passed in a blur of activity. The dress fittings led to floral consultations, which somehow expanded to include menu tastings and seating chart discussions. Before I knew it, I had become a de facto wedding planner, a role I embraced with surprising enthusiasm. Tyler and Gabriella settled into their new home with the expected mix of excitement and stress. Their housewarming barbecue in late September brought together both families for the first time since their engagement party. I watched with quiet pride as Tyler guided Gabriella's parents through the renovated kitchen, explaining the cabinet choices and lighting upgrades with genuine excitement. "He's a different person," Frank Henderson commented, joining me on the patio where I was arranging dessert platters. "More grounded." "Homeownership does that to you," I replied. "Forces you to think beyond next month's budget." "It's more than that." Frank accepted the lemonade I offered him. "He looks at you differently now, with respect. He always respected me, Frank. He just forgot for a while." The wedding itself was elegant without being ostentatious, a reflection of the couple's evolved perspective on what truly mattered. Gabriella was radiant in her gown, which we had indeed selected together during those Thursday afternoon appointments that had become treasured rituals. Tyler, standing at the altar in his tailored suit, looked momentarily overwhelmed when he first saw her walking down the aisle. I sat in the front row, wearing a blue dress that Richard had always loved, feeling his absence acutely, yet finding comfort in the continuation of family milestones. Emma sat beside me, squeezing my hand as Tyler and Gabriella exchanged their vows. For richer, for poorer, they promised each other, the traditional words carrying extra weight given our family's recent journey. At the reception, Tyler surprised me by requesting a mother-son dance, something we hadn't discussed or planned. As we moved across the floor to Frank Sinatra's "The Way You Look Tonight," he leaned in close. "Thank you," he said simply. "For the dance? For the lesson. For believing I could handle it. For not giving up on me." I smiled up at my son, this complex man who had somehow managed to inherit both Richard's financial precision and my stubborn determination. That's what family does, Tyler. We hold each other accountable, but we never give up. He nodded, turning me gently as the music continued. I've been thinking about something, about family and finances. Oh? Gabriella and I want to set up a college fund for Emma's twins, and for any future cousins they might have. His cheeks colored slightly at the implication. We thought maybe you could help us structure it, like Dad would have done. The request touched me deeply. I'd be honored. Your father would be so proud, Tyler. Of the college fund? Of the man you've become. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, I found myself sitting at a table with Stanley, who had consumed just enough champagne to become philosophical. Did you ever imagine it would work out this way? He asked, loosening his tie. When you made that crazy property purchase? Not exactly, I admitted. I was thinking more short-term. Teach Tyler a lesson about respect and financial realities. I didn't anticipate all of this. I gestured around at the reception, at Tyler and Gabriella dancing closely under twinkling lights. Life's funny that way, Stanley mused. You set out to teach one lesson and end up learning another entirely. What lesson do you think I learned, Stan? He considered this, unusually thoughtful for my typically boisterous brother-in-law. That you're stronger than you knew. That you didn't need Richard to make bold financial moves. That you're not just a retired teacher, but a savvy investor in your own right. His assessment surprised me. I hadn't thought of it that way. Well, you should. He raised his champagne glass in a small toast. Richard always said you were the real financial genius in the family. Turns out he was right, as usual. The next morning, Tyler and Gabriella left for their honeymoon in Portugal, a destination chosen for its perfect balance of culture, cuisine, and value, as Tyler had explained with characteristic detail. I returned to my empty house in Maplewood, greeted by the familiar creak of the front door and the comforting scent of lemon furniture polish. On my kitchen table was a thick envelope I hadn't noticed before leaving for the wedding. Inside was a detailed financial plan for my retirement years, meticulously prepared by Tyler. Not directives or demands, but options and scenarios, thoughtfully presented with space for my input and preferences. Attached was a simple note. Mom, these are just ideas for your consideration. Your wisdom and independence are never in question. I just want you to have the information to make your own choices, whatever they may be. I'm here if you want to discuss any of it. Love, Tyler. I smiled, setting the folder aside for later review. The financial burden comment that had sparked this entire journey now seemed distant, replaced by a new understanding between mother and son. Tyler had learned that a mortgage payment was more than just a monthly obligation. It was a commitment to building something lasting. And I had learned that sometimes the most valuable investment isn't in property or stocks, but in rebuilding relationships that have drifted off course. As I made my morning coffee, I gazed out at my garden where Richard and I had spent countless summer evenings. The property might not be in Lakeview Heights, but it was rich with memories and meaning, a different kind of wealth that no spreadsheet could capture. We did good, Richard, I said softly to the empty kitchen. He finally gets it. Somewhere. In the house, a floorboard creaked, the familiar settling sounds of a home well lived in. Not a burden, but a blessing. Not an expense, but an investment. Just as family should be. Spring arrived in Maplewood with an explosion of color. My garden, beds, lovingly prepared over decades, rewarded me with waves of daffodils, tulips, and hyacinths. I spent most mornings tending to them, finding peace in the rhythm of gardening that Richard and I had once shared. 5 months had passed since Tyler and Gabriella's wedding. Life had settled into new patterns. Their Sunday dinners at my house had expanded to include occasional weeknight visits. Sometimes Tyler would drop by unannounced with questions about home maintenance or gardening tips for their fledgling landscape. Other times, Gabriella would call asking for recipe advice or inviting me to join them for dinner at a new restaurant they'd discovered. On this particular April morning, as I knelt beside a cluster of emerging peonies, Frank Henderson appeared at the garden gate, newspaper tucked under his arm. "Morning, Vanessa. Mail carrier left this at my place by mistake." He held out a large envelope with the logo of Meridian Capital, Tyler's firm, in the corner. "Thanks, Frank." I brushed dirt from my gardening gloves before accepting it. "Want some coffee? Just brewed a fresh pot." "Never been known to turn down good coffee," he said with a smile, following me inside. As I poured our drinks, Frank settled at the kitchen table, glancing at the envelope. "Fancy letterhead? Something from Tyler's work?" "Seems so." I set his mug down and examined the envelope more closely. It was addressed to me, but I hadn't been expecting any correspondence from Meridian Capital. Inside was a formal letter on heavy stationery along with a glossy brochure. "Well, I'll be," I murmured as I scanned the contents. "Good news or bad?" Frank inquired, blowing on his coffee. "Interesting news," I replied. Meridian Capital is launching a new financial literacy program for educators. Workshops specifically designed to help teachers incorporate financial education into K-12 curricula. Sounds right up your alley. That's not all, I continued reading. They're inviting me to be a consultant on the elementary education component. Paid position, flexible hours. Frank's eyebrows rose. "Tyler's doing?" "Must be, though the letter is signed by the head of their community outreach division." I flipped through the brochure, which outlined the program in detail. They want to start with pilot workshops this summer. "Are you going to accept?" I considered the question. Retirement had its pleasures, the freedom to garden on weekday mornings, to read novels uninterrupted, to visit Emma in Seattle whenever I wished. But there were moments when I missed the classroom, the sense of purpose that came from shaping young minds. "I might," I said finally. "Could be interesting to combine my teaching experience with everything I've learned about financial management over the years." Frank nodded, a knowing glint in his eye. Funny how things come full circle. From financial burden to financial education consultant. Life does have a sense of humor, I agreed, and perhaps a sense of justice. After Frank left, I called Tyler's direct line at Meridian Capital. His assistant put me through immediately, a small courtesy that hadn't always been extended in the past. "Mom, hi," Tyler answered, sounding genuinely pleased to hear from me. "Did you get the package?" "I did. Just now. Want to explain how this happened?" I could almost hear him shifting in his chair, that slight nervousness that had characterized him as a boy when he wasn't sure if he was in trouble. "It was Gabriella's idea, actually. We were talking about how schools don't teach practical financial skills, and she mentioned how you'd always made a point of incorporating real-world math into your second-grade classroom. Remember those projects where students had to budget their classroom points for rewards?" I smiled at the memory. The mini-economy system. It was controversial with some parents who thought 8-year-olds shouldn't worry about budgeting. Well, Gabriella remembered me talking about it. When our outreach team was developing this program, I mentioned your approach. One thing led to another, and here we are. "And the consultant invitation? Was that your doing?" Tyler hesitated. "I may have suggested your name, but the committee reviewed your teaching credentials independently. They were impressed, Mom. 38 years in the classroom, department head for 15 of those, all those teaching awards. This isn't nepotism. You're genuinely qualified." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Not condescension, not the patronizing tone that had once colored his financial advice to me, but genuine professional respect. "I'll think about it," I promised. "It does sound intriguing." "No pressure. It's completely your call." A voice murmured something in the background. "Sorry, Mom, I've got to run to a meeting." "Dinner Sunday? Gabriella's trying a new lasagna recipe. Wouldn't miss it." After hanging up, I reread the proposal more carefully. The position would involve 3 months of curriculum development over the summer, followed by occasional workshops during the school year. The compensation was generous, more than fair for the time commitment involved. But what truly captured my interest was the program itself. Teaching children financial concepts early, empowering them with knowledge that most adults learned through painful trial and error. If I'd had such education as a child, would I have made different choices? Would Richard and I have achieved financial stability sooner? These questions followed me through the day, surfacing again that evening as I sorted through old photo albums in search of pictures for Emma's upcoming birthday gift. I paused at a faded photograph from 1993, Tyler at age 6, proudly displaying a homemade chart tracking his savings toward a coveted Nintendo system. Richard had helped him create it, complete with colorful markers and gold star stickers for each milestone reached. The next morning, I called the contact person listed in the letter and accepted the position. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a sleek conference room at Meridian Capital, surrounded by education specialists, financial advisors, and curriculum developers. To my surprise, I wasn't the only teacher in the room. They'd recruited educators from various grade levels and school districts. "Mrs. Mitchell," greeted a woman in her 40s with a warm smile. "I'm Elaine Carver, head of the education team. We're so pleased you could join us. Please, call me Vanessa. And thank you for the opportunity. Your son speaks very highly of your teaching methods. He mentioned something about a classroom economy system?" I nodded, feeling a flutter of pride at Tyler's advocacy. It was a simple approach, really. Students earned classroom dollars for completed assignments, good behavior, helping others. They could save for larger rewards, or spend on small, immediate ones, extra recess time, stickers, special classroom responsibilities. "And this was for second graders?" asked a man with salt and pepper hair who had introduced himself as the head of financial literacy outreach. "Yes, you'd be amazed what children that age can grasp when concepts are presented in relatable terms." The meeting proceeded with introductions and overview presentations. I found myself increasingly engaged, offering perspectives from my classroom experience, noting gaps in proposed materials that might confuse younger students. To my delight, my input was received with genuine interest, not mere politeness. During a break, I wandered to the window overlooking the city skyline. Tyler's office was somewhere on this floor, though I hadn't seen him yet today. "Quite a view, isn't it?" came a familiar voice behind me. I turned to find Gabriella approaching with 2 coffee cups, offering one to me. "Tyler mentioned you take it with just cream, no sugar. Hope that's still right." "Perfect, thank you." I accepted the mug gratefully. "Are you working here now too?" she laughed. "No, just had a meeting with their marketing team. My agency handles some of Meridian's digital campaigns. But I wanted to stop by and see how your first day was going." Surprisingly well. They seemed genuinely interested in creating something meaningful, not just a corporate PR exercise. That's what Tyler said. He fought pretty hard for this program. Actually, had to convince the board it was worth the investment. This revelation surprised me. "He didn't mention that." Gabriella smiled knowingly. "He wouldn't. But trust me, he went to bat for this. Said something about generational financial literacy being the key to creating long-term client relationships. Clever angle. He's good at finding the win-win." She checked her watch. "I should let you get back. Tyler's stuck in budget meetings all day, but we still on for dinner Friday? We have some news to share." The slight blush that accompanied this last statement told me everything I needed to know, but I simply nodded. Looking forward to it. The rest of the day passed quickly. By 5 o'clock, we had established a solid framework for the elementary curriculum and scheduled follow-up sessions. As I gathered my notes, Elaine approached with an additional folder. "These came from your son's team," she explained. Case: studies of families who improved their financial situations through education programs. thought they might provide useful real-world examples for our materials. I thanked her and tucked the folder into my bag, touched by Tyler's continued involvement despite his busy schedule. Outside the building, I was surprised to find Frank waiting beside his car. "Figured you might appreciate a ride home," he offered. "First days can be exhausting, even for experienced professionals." How thoughtful. I slipped into the passenger seat, suddenly aware of how tired I actually was. "How did you know when I'd be finished?" Frank looked slightly sheepish. "Might have texted Tyler to ask. This coordination between the men in my life, one my son, the other my friend, neighbor, whatever Frank was becoming to me, was unexpected, but not unwelcome." "Successful day?" Frank asked as we navigated through evening traffic. "Very. It's fascinating work, translating complex financial concepts into lessons children can understand and apply. If anyone can do it, it's you. You always had a gift for explanation." He glanced over with a smile. "Remember when you helped me understand those reverse mortgage offers I kept getting?" I laughed at the memory. Frank had been bombarded with misleading mailers after his wife passed away, and we'd spent an evening at his kitchen table deciphering the fine print. "Financial literacy isn't just for children," I said. "Adults need it too, especially seniors targeted by predatory offers." "Maybe that should be your next project," Frank suggested. "Financial protection for seniors. Lord knows we could use it." The idea planted a seed in my mind, one that would continue to grow in the days that followed. Friday evening arrived with warm spring air and the promise of weekend relaxation. I dressed carefully for dinner at Tyler and Gabriella's, a casual dress that Emma had sent from a boutique in Seattle, paired with comfortable flats for the walk through their backyard garden that Gabriella had been promising to show me. They greeted me at the door with matching smiles, Tyler taking my light jacket while Gabriella led me through to their renovated kitchen. The house had transformed in the months since they'd moved in, becoming a true reflection of their combined tastes. Tyler's preference for clean lines softened by Gabriella's eye for color and texture. "Mom, wine?" Tyler offered, already reaching for a bottle. "Just half a glass," I accepted, noting the sparkling water Gabriella poured for herself, another confirmation of my suspicion about their news. We settled in the dining room, where Tyler had prepared his specialty, beef bourguignon, Richard's recipe that I'd taught him years ago when he first moved into his own apartment. The familiar aroma brought a wave of nostalgia, of Sunday afternoons with Richard at the stove, Tyler at his elbow learning the precise timing for adding each ingredient. "This is delicious," I complimented after the first few bites. "Your father would be proud." Tyler's expression softened. I was thinking about him while cooking, remembering how he used to say that a good meal was an investment in family happiness. He believed that sincerely. Food and finances, the two pillars of Richard Mitchell's philosophy. We shared a laugh, the memory of Richard's quirks warming, the room as surely as the spring evening. "Speaking of investments," Gabriella said, exchanging a glance with Tyler, "we have something to share with you." Tyler reached for her hand on the table, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "Two things, actually." "I'm listening," I said, though I suspected I already knew at least one of their announcements. "First," Tyler began, "we're expecting. Baby Mitchell is due in November." Despite my suspicions, hearing the words aloud filled me with joy. "Oh, my dears, that's wonderful news." I rose to embrace them both, noting the gentle way Tyler's hand rested protectively against Gabriella's still flat stomach. In that gesture, I saw Richard again, the same mixture of pride, love, and barely concealed terror he'd displayed when I'd told him I was pregnant with Emma. "We wanted you to be the first to know," Gabriella said. "Well, after the doctor." "I'm honored." I returned to my seat, dabbing at unexpected tears. "November is a perfect month for a baby, just in time for the holidays." That's what I said, Gabriella agreed, though Tyler immediately started calculating the tax implications of a December versus November birth. Tyler looked appropriately chagrined. Force of habit, but that actually relates to our second piece of news. He excused himself momentarily, returning with a manila envelope similar to the one I'd received from Meridian Capital. "This is for you, Mom." Inside was a formal document with a legal heading. As I scanned it, my breath caught. "This is a trust," I said, looking up in confusion. "For me?" "For you, and eventually for the baby," Tyler explained. "We've established an educational trust with two components. The first is to support your work with the financial literacy program. Funding? For materials, classroom implementation, whatever you need beyond what Meridian provides." "Tyler, that's not necessary. They're compensating me fairly." "It's not about necessity," he interrupted gently. "It's about legacy. The second component of the trust is for our child's education and any future children we might have. But here's the innovative part. For every dollar that goes into their college fund, an equal amount goes to expanding the education program you're developing. We call it the Mitchell Family Financial Literacy Foundation," Gabriella added. "We want our children to grow up understanding money, not just having it or spending it, but respecting what it represents, the way you and Richard taught Tyler." I stared at the document, overwhelmed by its implications. "This is extraordinary." "It's also practical," Tyler said, his analytical side emerging. "Creates tax advantages, establishes a family philanthropic presence, provides structure for long-term educational impact. But mostly, Mom, it's our way of saying that what you know, what you can teach, has real measurable value." The irony wasn't lost on me. Months ago, this same son had labeled me a potential financial burden. Now he was establishing a foundation based on my teaching expertise, creating a legacy that would extend far beyond our immediate family. "Financial burden has become a financial blessing," I said softly. Tyler winced slightly at the reference, but nodded. I deserved that. And yes, that's exactly right. After dinner, as promised, Gabriella led me through their backyard garden, pointing out the raised beds Tyler had built following the design in my old gardening books. The spring plantings were just emerging: tomatoes, peppers, herbs, and flowers intermixed in companion arrangements. "He referenced your garden journal," Gabriella explained. "Found it in the garage when you were cleaning out boxes. Hope you don't mind. He made copies of some pages." "I don't mind at all. In fact, I was touched that Tyler had valued those. Casual notes I'd kept over the years, tracking what grew well and where." "He's different now," Gabriella said suddenly. "Since the house, the mortgage, everything that happened. More grounded, more like the man I always knew he could be." "Responsibility does that," I observed. "Especially when it's embraced rather than resented." She nodded, absently placing a hand on her abdomen, a gesture I remembered well from my own pregnancies. "I'm glad our child will know this version of Tyler, the one who understands that value isn't just about dollar amounts." Back inside, Tyler was loading the dishwasher, a task Richard had always claimed required engineering precision. I watched him arrange the plates with the same methodical care his father had once demonstrated. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "And for the trust. It's more than generous. It's thoughtful in the truest sense of the word." "It felt right," he replied, "especially with the baby coming. I've been thinking a lot about family legacies. What Dad passed to me, what I want to pass on." "And what conclusion have you reached?" Tyler closed the dishwasher and leaned against the counter, his expression serious. "That the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property, it's knowledge, values, perspective." "Your father would drink to that." "He would, wouldn't he?" Tyler smiled. "Remember how he used to say that a mortgage isn't a burden? It's a commitment to your future self?" I nodded, throat tight with emotion. He said it every month when we sent in the payment. I get it now, Mom. Every time I make our mortgage payment, I think about what we're building. Not just equity in a house, but stability for our family, a foundation for our child. As I prepared to leave, Tyler walked me to my car, the spring evening wrapping around us with the scent of newly cut grass and flowering trees. I have a confession, he said as I unlocked the door. I was the one who delivered that trust document. To your office last week. I paused. That was you? Frank said he found it in his mailbox. Tyler looked slightly embarrassed. I might have asked Frank to play along. Wanted to see your reaction without being there myself. Too nervous, I guess. The image of my confident, analytical son feeling uncertain about my response to his gesture warmed my heart. You and Frank seem to be conspiring quite a bit these days. He's a good man. Cares about you? Yes, he does. And you care about him too, I think. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I do. He's been a wonderful friend. Tyler nodded, seemingly satisfied. Dad would approve, you know. He always liked Frank. The simple statement, offered without judgment or expectation, felt like permission I hadn't realized I was seeking. Richard had been gone 5 years, but his presence still lingered in moments like these. Drive safely, Tyler said, closing my car door after I settled in. See you Sunday? Emma's calling in for a family chat at noon. I'll be here, I promised. As I drove home through the quiet streets of our town, I reflected on how differently this story could have ended. Had I reacted differently to Tyler's financial burden comment, with hurt silence or bitter resentment, where would we be now? Had Tyler rejected the lesson of that first mortgage payment, clinging to his misconceptions about my financial situation, what opportunities would have been lost? The first mortgage payment I'd required of him had indeed been a burden, deliberately so. But it had also been a bridge, connecting his world of spreadsheets and projections with the real-world implications of financial commitments. From that, bridge had sprung understanding, respect, and now a legacy that would extend to a new generation. Richard would indeed have approved. Not just of Frank's place in my life, but of Tyler's growth, of the Mitchell Financial Literacy Foundation, of the grandchild who would grow up understanding both the value of money and its limitations. As I turned onto my street, I saw Frank, sitting on his porch, clearly waiting up to ensure I arrived home safely. He raised a hand in greeting, and I waved back, feeling a rush of affection for this steadfast presence in my life. Some burdens, it turns out, aren't burdens at all when carried with purpose and shared with those we love. They're investments in relationships, in understanding, in future generations who might navigate life's financial waters with greater confidence because of lessons learned today. From financial burden to foundation founder in less than a year. Life's journey takes unexpected turns, but with the right roadmap, and perhaps a strategic detour or two, even the steepest paths can lead to breathtaking views. 18 months later, on a crisp November afternoon, I stood in Tyler and Gabriella's living room, hanging a birthday banner while Frank balanced precariously on a stepladder to secure the other end. Little higher on your side, I directed. Perfect. The house on Sycamore Street had transformed once again, this time with bright balloons and streamers in primary colors. A table by the window held a small mountain of wrapped gifts, and in the kitchen, Tyler was putting final touches on a birthday cake shaped like a teddy bear. His third attempt, after 2 previous disasters that had sent him to the bakery for emergency consultations. Never thought I'd see the day, Frank commented as he climbed down from the ladder. Tyler Mitchell, financial analyst extraordinaire, fretting over cake frosting. Parenthood changes people, I replied, adjusting a streamer. Some priorities shift. Speaking of the birthday girl, where is little Ellie? Frank asked, referring to Eleanor Gabriella Mitchell, who was turning 1 today. Upstairs with her mother. Gabriella's trying to get her to nap before the guests arrive, though I suspect that's a losing battle with all the excitement. As if on cue, a happy squeal echoed from upstairs, followed by Gabriella's gentle laughter. Moments later, they appeared at the top of the stairs, Gabriella looking elegant despite obvious fatigue, and Eleanor perched on her hip, dark curls, framing a face that was pure Tyler, except for her mother's expressive brown eyes. "Someone refuses to miss a moment of her special day," Gabriella announced, descending carefully. Eleanor spotted me and immediately lunged forward, arms outstretched. "Gamma!" I took her willingly, inhaling the sweet baby scent that somehow still clung to her despite her transition from infant to toddler. "Hello, birthday girl. Did you have a good nap?" She shook her head emphatically. "No nap. Cake." Tyler emerged from the kitchen, frosting smeared across his once immaculate button-down shirt. "Cake is still in progress, Pumpkin. Daddy's artistic vision is proving challenging." "I told you we should have ordered one," Gabriella said. But there was no reproach in her tone, only affection for her husband's determination to master yet another skill. "Mitchell men don't admit defeat," Tyler insisted. "Besides, I've almost got it. The ears are just lopsided. Bearing impaired," Frank suggested helpfully. The politically correct term for a teddy bear with asymmetrical ears. Tyler laughed, a free, easy sound that had become more common these days. "Exactly. I'm making an inclusive teddy bear." As the others returned to party preparations, I carried Eleanor to the window seat, settling her on my lap to watch the neighborhood children playing across the street. This had become our ritual during my visits. Quiet moments of observation and conversation, as much as one could converse with a 1-year-old. "See the doggy?" I pointed to Mrs. Hargrove's spotted terrier. "Doggy," Eleanor agreed enthusiastically. Then, with the abrupt topic changes typical of her age, "Gamma House?" It was her way of asking about my home, the Maplewood house that remained as much a part of my identity as my name. "Gamma's house is good," I assured her. "The flowers are sleeping for winter, but they'll wake up in spring." She nodded seriously, as if processing complex horticultural principles. "Ellie help?" "Yes. When spring comes, you can help Gamma in the garden." I smoothed her wild curls, marveling at how quickly the year had passed. "You'll be an excellent gardening assistant." The doorbell rang, announcing the first guests. Soon the house filled, with family and friends, Emma and Diane with the twins, who at 9 were fascinated by their baby cousin, Stanley and his new wife Patricia, colleagues from both Gabriella's agency and Tyler's firm, neighbors who had become friends. I relinquished Eleanor to the excitement of the gathering, finding myself beside Frank at the refreshment table. "Quite the transformation," he observed, nodding toward Tyler, who was now kneeling beside Eleanor as she examined a gift, his expression one of absolute adoration. "Which transformation?" I asked. "The house, the career shift, or becoming a father?" "All of it," Frank said. "But mostly the man himself. Remember how he used to be? Always rushing, always calculating, always 10 steps ahead, but somehow missing what was right in front of him?" I nodded, watching as my son patiently helped Eleanor tear wrapping paper, making a game of the process rather than hurrying to the next gift. He's present now, in every sense of the word. The Mitchell Family Financial Literacy Foundation had grown beyond our initial expectations, expanding from classroom programs to community workshops and online resources. Tyler had gradually shifted his focus at Meridian Capital, eventually creating a new division focused on educational outreach and community investment strategies. It hadn't all been smooth sailing. There had been tense board meetings, skeptical executives, budget constraints. But Tyler had approached each challenge with the same determination he'd once applied to market analyses and investment portfolios. "Mom," Tyler called from across the room. "Emma's asking about the foundation's teacher grants. Can you explain how they work? You're better at translating the details. I joined Emma and Diane on the sofa, describing the grant program we'd developed for teachers implementing financial literacy modules in their classrooms. The foundation now supported educators in 27 schools across the state, with plans to expand nationally in the coming year. So the grants come from investment returns on the original endowment? Emma asked, always quick to grasp financial structures. Partially, I explained. The endowment generates the core funding, but we also have corporate matching programs through Meridian and other partners. Plus, the milestone contributions Tyler and Gabriella make at family events. This had become their tradition, marking birthdays, anniversaries, and achievements with donations to the foundation. Eleanor's birth had prompted their largest contribution yet, establishing a special fund for early childhood financial education research. It's brilliant, Diane commented. Building financial literacy into family celebrations makes it part of your identity rather than just another obligation. That was Tyler's insight, I acknowledged. He recognized that healthy financial habits are formed early and reinforced through consistent, positive associations. As if summoned by our conversation, Tyler appeared with the birthday cake, its lopsided teddy bear ears somehow adding charm rather than detracting from the creation. "Cake time, everyone," he announced, as Gabriella guided Eleanor to her special chair. We gathered around, singing Happy Birthday, while Eleanor beamed with excitement. When it came time to blow out the single candle, Tyler and Gabriella bent, on either side of their daughter, helping her with gentle puffs of air. The perfectly synchronized teamwork of two people who had found their rhythm as partners and parents. After cake and ice cream, while Eleanor explored her new toys with the enthusiastic assistance of Emma's twins, I found myself in the kitchen, with Tyler helping with cleanup. "Successful party," I commented, rinsing dessert plates. "Thanks to you and Frank. We couldn't have pulled it off without the decorating squad." Happy to help, though Frank's latter skills might need some refinement. Tyler smiled, loading the dishwasher with the same precision his father had always shown. "He's good for you, Mom. I'm glad you have each other." The simple observation warmed me. Frank and I had gradually evolved from neighbors to friends to something more, a relationship defined by mutual respect, shared interests, and comfortable companionship. We had no plans to marry or combine households, both valuing our independence too much for that. But we traveled together, attended community events as a couple, and spent most evenings in each other's company. "He is good for me," I agreed. "Just as Gabriella is good for you. She's the best decision I ever made." Tyler paused, dishcloth in hand. "Well, second best?" "What was the first?" "Learning to listen to my mother instead of lecturing her." His smile turned rueful. "Still can't believe I called you a financial burden." "Ancient history," I assured him. "And it led to all this, didn't it? The house, the foundation, the financial literacy programs. Sometimes the most painful moments spark the most meaningful growth." That's a very teacher thing to say. Once a teacher, always a teacher. Speaking of which, how are the plans for next month's Educator Summit coming along? Tyler brightened, ever enthusiastic about the foundation's work. "Ahead of schedule. We've confirmed speakers from 3 universities, plus that financial psychology expert you recommended. Registrations are nearly double what we projected." "Wonderful. And the practical workshop materials?" "Being finalized next week. I think you'll be pleased with the elementary curriculum updates. We've incorporated all your suggestions about interactive learning stations." Our conversation was interrupted by Eleanor toddling into the kitchen, dragging a plush teddy bear nearly as large as herself, a gift from Stanley and Patricia. "Gamma! Bear!" she announced proudly. I crouched to admire the toy. "What a wonderful bear. Almost as good as Daddy's cake bear." Tyler laughed. "Higher praise than my baking deserves." He scooped Eleanor up, bear and all, in a smooth motion that spoke of practiced parenthood. should we show Gamma what else we've been working on? The special project? Eleanor nodded enthusiastically, and Tyler carried her toward the sunroom, addition they'd completed last spring. I followed, curious about this special project I hadn't heard mentioned before. The sunroom was bright despite the November afternoon, its southern exposure capturing the last of the day's sunlight. Along one wall stood a child-sized table and chair, obviously new. On the table was what appeared to be a miniature garden, a shallow tray filled with soil, small plants, and tiny garden tools. Our indoor garden for winter, Tyler explained. So Eleanor can practice helping you in spring. I moved closer, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. The tray contained small herb plants, mint, basil, thyme, along with child-safe gardening tools and colorful plant markers. Eleanor, "Help, Gamma," my granddaughter stated with determination, pointing to the little watering can. "That's right, sweetie," Tyler confirmed. "You're learning to garden just like Gamma, so you'll be ready when the flowers wake up." The parallel to my earlier conversation with Eleanor about the sleeping garden wasn't lost on me. Tyler had been listening, as he increasingly did these days, not just to words spoken directly to him, but to the quiet exchanges happening around him. "It's perfect," I said, genuinely moved. "What a wonderful way to spend winter days." "I have something else to show you," Tyler said, setting Eleanor down beside her garden. From a drawer in the built-in cabinets, he retrieved a legal envelope. The latest from the foundation. Inside was a formal document outlining a new initiative, the Vanessa Mitchell Teaching Excellence Award, a yearly grant for educators demonstrating innovation in financial literacy instruction. This is... I paused, searching for words. "Overdue," Tyler finished. "The foundation wouldn't exist without your expertise. The board unanimously approved naming the flagship teaching award after you. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just help us select the first recipients next spring." As we stood in the sunlight-filled room, Eleanor happily examining her little plants, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with financial security or professional recognition. This journey, from being labeled a burden to being honored as a foundation, had never really been about money at all. It had been about value, about seeing and being seen, about the legacy we create through what we teach others. The party continued. Around us, voices and laughter spilling from the living room where Frank was apparently entertaining the group with one of his infamous neighborhood association stories. But in this quiet moment, I saw the future unfolding in ways I couldn't have imagined that morning when Tyler's financial burden comment had stung so sharply. Eleanor would grow up understanding money as a tool, not a measure of worth. The Mitchell Family Financial Literacy Foundation would help thousands of children develop healthy relationships with finances. Tyler and Gabriella would continue building their life in this house that had once been my impulsive teaching moment, purchase. And I would continue my own journey, not as someone diminished by age or retirement, but as a woman still growing, still contributing, still finding new ways to share the wisdom earned through decades of experience. "Ready to rejoin the party?" Tyler asked, offering his arm in a gesture reminiscent of Richard's old-fashioned courtesy. "Absolutely," I replied, taking his arm as Eleanor clutched my free hand. Together, the 3 generations of Mitchells returned to the celebration, a family transformed not by wealth or property, but by the priceless currency of mutual respect. That first mortgage payment, intended as a burden, had instead become the foundation upon which something far more valuable had been built. Not just a house on Sycamore Street, but a bridge between generations, a path to understanding, and most importantly, a reminder that true worth is measured not in dollars and cents, but in the lessons we share and the legacy we leave. As Frank liked to say whenever Tyler mentioned the family's financial planning, some investments can't be tracked on spreadsheets, but they yield the highest returns of all. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.